Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Mad Max Fury Road. So, for some odd reason, it seems that every movie that I'm choosing lately just so coincidentally happens to be on HBO Max. It's not I'm like going out of my way to search like, oh, what's another HBO Max movie I'm trying to find? No, it just so coincidentally ends up having this be that this movie was on like HBO Max. I'm like, I want to watch this movie, and then I find out it's on HBO Max. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I was gonna watch this movie anyways. So, Mad Max Fury Road. How did I feel about this movie? Well, I can first off really enjoy the story where we of course have Furiosa who's going and taking these women and rescuing them from a life of giving birth to children, and that seems to be their only important task, to just keep popping out babies. And so we have the really interesting story there. And I think that the most important thing about this movie is that it's visually really good looking. It's a good looking film. I can enjoy certain things about this, even though it does kind of feel like we're just like it doesn't really feel like we have not much anywhere to go with this film, or it feels that this movie is way too focused on Furiosa instead of the guy who is holding the title of this film, who is to be Mad Max. It seems that they do a good intro for Mad Max, but it feels also like this character, it doesn't really factor in, or it doesn't really matter for Max to actually be in this film. If you actually take Mad Max in this film, besides one thing that he does off camera, he doesn't really bring anything good enough to the table that wouldn't have been brought by someone else for the most of this movie. And if anyone is to say it's like, well, like, but what about his, like, him being the blood bag, or him being like basically this person who was to give up blood to a number of people in this movie, I'm like, man, if that's just the sole purpose of Mad Max in this film, then man, like, we should really just of certain characters just be way lower than we ever thought they could ever be. Because I don't like, I can enjoy the setup of this character in the very beginning of this film. I can enjoy how like this Mad Max is to actually be more crazy than just like a guy who has a very short fuse or whatever, because like I wouldn't have liked if we had a Mad Max that was just kind of this Wolverine-esque like character. Like, I like the fact that we end up having really just Mad Max being this crazy person, but I don't think that they do enough with it. Like, I don't think that they, like, we don't have him have nightmares while he's sleeping at night, or like, we don't really have the craziness really factor in. Like, we don't have Max consistently doing mistakes or consistently getting scared because he's hallucinating. Like, I don't think the crazy part works and goes on to be put to be enough in this film, where we really have like somebody like slapping Max and kind of like getting his head on straight kind of thing. That never happens in this film. And also, for a guy that had possibly led a number of people to their deaths, you would have thought Mad Max just kind of having his fate here. We kind of question why Mad Max is even running away from him being in the Citadel. Is it really just the factor of like the flight or fight response, where Mad Max is to not to accept his fate. Instead, he is going to want to just fight out of it because he is to just be that guy. I don't know. I like you would have thought like he would have just been like, "Oh, I can die now. Great." Like I don't have to be in this wasteland of a world, but like I don't know. Max is just a different feather. But yeah, so with that said, um, I like how we have like we can really tell really how very few resources are in this world, possibly compared to the original Mad Max, where it kind of feels like things were scarce, but like now it feels even much more so that things are very much scarce than the original way of doing things, to the point of them having to have women produce mother's milk to then have them have some kind of uh, like dairy product to be put out there, uh, and but like water is a rare resource. Everybody is having like basically an arms race for gasoline because everybody just loves to do road trips. Everybody just loves to just be on the road for whatever reason in this story, because they have nothing better to do to just drive everywhere. And but no, the real reason is like everybody's trying to barter and buy resources, and that's the whole reason for road tripping and scavenging. And so and we end up having these kind of certain collection of clans in this movie also, and so like I kind of have fun with the way of which of certain batches, excuse me, certain batches of characters are to look in here, and how their vehicles are also to like make them look unique. So not everything looks the exact same, and but here's kind of the downside. We do have the Interceptor, Mad Max's car, used again here, but it's kind of an Easter egg of a thing. Like, we don't have at any point Mad Max getting the mission of him realizing, yeah, I want to get my car back. That never happens. It's just like he is just looking at his like lady and he's like, oh, but there's nothing he's going to do about it. Or it just really doesn't matter enough to him. It seems that we also like we are to remember Mad Max not having like very many lines in his previous film, and in this movie we have like at some points where like at points Tom doesn't look like Tom in this movie for it kind of like it looks like we have Tom's like stunt double at some part of this film. Where every time I look at the guy who's supposed to be Tom Hardy in this film, I'm like, is that really Tom in this movie? Like, I don't think that looks like Tom. Like that really. Plus, there's a lot of times where I don't even think that that even sounds like Tom also in this film. So I just have to question a ton of things going on in this movie of what actually they're doing. Um, like, why is it that Tom Hardy doesn't always look consistently like Tom in this movie? Uh, but anyways, with that said, yeah, that's all I think I want to say in a very cryptic-like sense about Mad Max Fury Road. I'm gonna go and probably talk about this movie in a very roundabout way, or paraphrase, or whatever they usually do. But I'm gonna go through and talk about this film. So, with that said, I think it's about that time, yet again, to go into this double five time territory, because it's about that time to go into this thing called spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about that time we need to spoil this movie. Check it out on HBO Max. I would say that this movie has... Forcibly, I have to say that, like, this movie has this kind of middle-of-the-road kind of thing to it. Like, I would probably never go out of my way to say that this movie is a great film, because I just feel that it doesn't have a good enough story. It doesn't have a good enough origin for our character, and Mad Max isn't even the focus here, which he should be, because he is to be the titled character. And I think that's my only real complaint, is it feels that there's so many things that are going on here that Mad Max isn't really affected by. And there's nothing really of the whole craziness that they go enough into. So, with that, let's go into spoilers. So, we of course go on in the very beginning of this film is to set up that at one point Max was a cop. He was a cop. And so at one point he was to lose his wife and kid, because that's kind of the setup of the original story. And we just see this girl possibly getting trampled by something. Like, I don't know, it's like this quick scene that we're just having to see this kid just being trampled by a vehicle, but not really, like, it's not really done well enough to really show anything of what actually happened for this story. It's some glimpse, and we just have to make assumptions. So, we go on and we have, of course, Max mentioning here that, like, hey, if you've been in this wasteland long enough, you're bound to go a little mad. And so we, of course, have these war dogs going and retrieving Max and taking his vehicle, because his vehicle was both Max and his vehicle, he was to get into it, try to drive off. His vehicle ends up getting flipped over, and so they end up retrieving Max out of his vehicle, and they also take the vehicle and they start working on it. And so Max gets grabbed and eventually is to see his vehicle in this place they are in getting fixed up. So Max in the back of his back is getting tattooed, mentioning that he's a universal donor, and that he also is to have a number of things that are to be tattooed into him, information, so on and so forth. And so we have Max, who's going on and taking this time, because I guess these guys don't realize how strong he is. And he goes on and, of course, is to escape and is to try to run off as this organic mechanic, or this tattoo artist, is trying to go after this guy, Max, because he's a universal donor. So we have Max here, who has these chain-like cuffs, and so Max is running off, and so he opens this door, not realizing that opening this door is to lead to him falling off this cliff kind of thing. So he's like, whoa. And so he balances himself. All of a sudden, he ends up seeing this crane like thing dangling in the air. So Tom is to see a bunch of these war dogs all scrambling, and so Tom, of course, or Max, of course, is to jump onto this hook, and he's now just starting to swing, but he's realizing slowly but surely he has nowhere to go. And so these guys go back, and while he's swinging, they go and try to grab him and retrieve him back into this spot for Max to go into this cage and end up being this blood bag for, of course, a guy named Nux. So we have Nux, who has these two lumps on the side of his neck called Barry and Larry, and so he'll end up talking about him later on, uh, when he is seemingly still alive. Which we're like, why is he still alive in this film? Because they just need for him to do something. Like, we need to have this guy kind of realize, like, that he isn't really, it should really change his ways at some point. So, but yeah, so we go on, and we of course have, because I'm kind of focusing too much on Mad Max here. So at the very beginning of this film, we are at this Citadel still with Mad Max kind of chained up, and while Max was kind of running through that hallway, going through those doors where he almost fell off this kind of side of this cliff there, we had all these people just kind of forcibly like uh, reminding him of all the people that had died with Mad Max being the way that he is, leading a lot of people to their death, saying that he, of course, is to have been like their friend, but they had died in the end, because they had been Mad Max's friend. So, but now we're in the Citadel, where Mad Max is still at, and we'll go back to that. So, the Citadel is, of course, going on with this war rig to produce all this product, to go on a road trip to exchange this product for gasoline, because they're going on and giving these guys aqua cola. They're going on and giving these characters produce and mother's milk to exchange for gasoline, and which is gas. So we have Immortan Joe, who is going on and having these the wretched people going and desperately going, hoping that they're going to get a splash of water coming out of this fountain. And so we have Immortan Joe, who's telling everybody that he is the Redeemer, and that at some point all of my war warrior or war dogs will eventually make it to Valhalla, because these guys have this like Norse mythology belief about when they die they'll make it to Valhalla. I guess they have that weird northern or North mythology belief, because maybe some people do, because I guess they're warriors. So we have this water, of course, being like sprayed out of this mouth of this building they're in, and so everybody's desperately like clamoring for this water, like, oh my god, oh, water! So even to the point that they're fighting over it, and so Immortan Joe is just telling these people, it's like, well, hey, like, don't be so like addicted to the water, because there's going to be at some point where you are not going to have it. And so just kind of like really like use it sparingly. So we go on here, and so Furiosa is to go on with this war rig, and so she's going on driving off, and so we end up finding out that she is technically going a different way than what they had planned. That all of a sudden, Furiosa is telling the guys that they're going east, and they're like, okay, this is weird. Why is she taking a different route? That seems odd. But the war dogs are just like, meh, like, all right, like, she knows where we're going, so she can't be steering us the wrong direction, right? So all of a sudden Immortan Joe and everybody is starting to realize that Furiosa is going a different direction, and they spot that right away. So, like, okay, maybe we should send some people out there to kind of turn her back into the right direction, or the direction we want her to go, to this location. And so they start seeking the war dogs out there. We also have a Immortan Joe that's going and checking on things to make sure something isn't all quite that missing. And so all of a sudden we have a number of kind of things that are to be listed on these walls of Immortan Joe's kind of women's suite, where he, of course, is all to have these girls who are called the Splendid, uh, or Toast the Knowing. What kind of a name is this? Capable, the Dag, Cheeto, the Fragile. Okay, that's those are names. So seriously, those are the names of these girls. So we all of a sudden have Immortal Joe realizing that her women are gone, and that this woman is spouting out how these girls aren't just things, and they're not his warlords, and there's so many other kind of like phrases and stuff that are on these walls, finally saying that they're going to freaking leave here because they're sick of this, having to just spurn out these childs, and because that's all that they are to have to do here, is to just keep popping out children, to where we end up having the Splendid, who is actually quite a ways along, and but it also seems like one other girl, I think, called the Dag, is to also be with child, and because that's all these girls are good for, sadly, and that's horrible. So we of course have Immortan Joe, who kills this woman who's kind of spouting all this stuff. And so now he's just frustrated by all these women running off on him. So he's like, hey, let's send everyone out there to go on and collect these women because they're very important to him. And so Immortan Joe personally goes out there with his son, Ridicus Eructus, a guy named Nathan Jones, which I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen Nathan Jones. Like, I know he was a WWE guy, and I know he's in the movie Condemned, and like, I would love it if he was in more movies, but like, it just seems that like I've only seen him in this too, but who knows? Maybe he's in more films, and I've never even known about it. But we also have a guy called the People Eater, that's to be this kind of big uh, guy with these like awful looking feet. Uh, and he ends up having his own kind of vehicle being put together. We have this the gun farmer, who has this kind of peacemaker mobile that eventually kind of ties into that cutscene that Mad Max is to go on and try to take down this peacemaker, and he comes back with all these bullets, and also the guy ends up going freaking blind, and so he's basically just shooting away with these guns at seemingly nothing because he doesn't know what he's firing on. So that was kind of a silly thing for him to do. Silly. Anyways, so we have people starting to run off, and so we have Slit, who's going and stealing this steering wheel from Nux's car, and so Nux is going and stealing back his steering wheel because he's like, no, like, you can't take this from me, like, this is my car. And Slit is like, well, hey, you're not even healthy enough to go on and drive this car, and because Nux is to need this this blood bag, who is Mad Max here, to even keep on, like, is to basically keep breathing here. So Nux is like, no, like, if anything, like, if I'm really just to go out here, like, I'm gonna go out to just like go out in a warrior's death and make my way to Valhalla. And so we really just have Nux here, who's just telling the organic mechanic to go and get his blood bag down, so that way, like, this blood bag will just be strapped to this guy's car, so they can go on and still do this mission, and eventually, I'm sure, at some point, get this guy to die so they can witness him. Uh, because he's going in this Nux Chevrolet Coupe. Interesting. So now we have everybody going out there. We have this thing called the morality machine, or the morale machine, that is to be called the Doofwagon. That, of course, be the thing with all the speakers on it, and the one guy is just like guitaring away, just funny. I think there was this one video where for Conan, where there was to be some girl that was to admit that she was to go on and be with the guy who was to be the guitarist on Mad Max Fury Road. But we also had the one thing where Conan was pretending to be this this guitarist on this machine from Mad Max Fury Road. So it was kind of funny. So we go on here, and we, of course, have Furiosa deciding to go east, and then she is to start going into this sandstorm while all these guys are coming, because we end up having to start this kind of attack, or just wanting to stop these people. And so eventually one of the war dogs go and try to grab Furiosa, and saying like, hey, what did you do? What did you do? And so we have Furiosa who just kind of batting this guy away. And so they go into this sandstorm. And so we have it where, of course, we have Rictus Eruptus, who's going on and mentioning that, like, oh, she's trying to lose us. She's trying to lose us in there. So we go on, and we, of course, have Nux, who's like, yeah, I'm definitely going to go in this sandstorm to retrieve this girl, because if I die, like, I'll end up going in Valhalla. We also had one point where Nux is kind of like trying to drive as quickly as possible, and he's going on and trying to like wave down Immortan Joe, and all of a sudden he does look at him, and Nux is like, oh my god, he looked at me, and Slit is like, no, he was looking at the horizon. He's like, no, he looked right at me. So we have Nux driving much more faster than anyone else is to try to get to this woman. And so eventually what happens is that when Nux is to get his car close to this war rig, we all of a sudden have, at one point, I think they are to have trouble with their tires. And so now Mad Max is to have to get from the very front of this car, because he almost got freaking hit in the head. with one of these spears, to now having to be pushed in the back of the car and for them to just kind of hold on. But Mad Max is to go on and to basically kick this slit guy off. And so we have, of course, Nux here, who's going and pouring gasoline all in his car, and he's almost tempted to put this torch in his car, and so Mad Max is desperately trying to stop him, but it seems that like he's having difficulties getting into this guy's car because he put the sunroof up, and so Mad Max is breaking into the back of this rear window, and so he grabs the flare, preventing Nux from like destroying this car. But eventually, the car ends up like getting I think it ends up getting flipped over anyways. So we eventually end up having it after this whole sandstorm event. We eventually have this. We have the Splendid, who goes on to talk to Furiosa and saying like, "Hey, we can't really breathe back there. Like, hey, can you help us out?" And so like Furiosa is like, "Hey, like, don't come up here because like you're in danger because like they're getting attacked." So Furiosa tries to defend with the best ability, but eventually they are, of course, having problems with the car or the war rig. So they end up stopping the vehicle after the whole sandstorm event, thinking that it's possible that they have lost everybody. And I think everybody just took for the most part, took the longer way around. And like not everybody was going to risk going after these girls in the sandstorm. So we just have it where Mad Max is a toss, of course, this Nux over his shoulders, and is to now have to just kind of walk as quickly as possible to make his way to the war rig. And we end up having this double barrel shotgun that kind of Mad Max is known to be wielding a lot. And so Mad Max is to realize there isn't any bullets in this double barrel shotgun because he tries to go and shoot the chain, but we find out that, of course, there's no bullets in that gun. So he's like, that sucks. So we have Mad Max finding the war rig, and so he goes on and uses this empty double-barrel shotgun to just intimidate these women into doing what he wants them to do. So we, of course, have it where when Mad Max is to get to them, all that he really wants them to do is figure out a way to break this chain. He keeps kind of like smacking it and like saying like, hey, like break my chain. So, and eventually Furiosa is to convince Mad Max. It's like, well, hey, I have a tool to like help you out of that mask that you're wearing. Because I don't think they have an actual name for it. I couldn't find an actual name of what the actual mask was. So, yeah, so we go on and we have here all of a sudden Nux is to wake up from being unconscious. He wakes up and he ends up starting to fight all of these women. Because if Mad Max wasn't already having to fight Furiosa, and there was this kind of really cool thing where he ends up using this truck's door as a kind of thing to just kind of like fight off Furiosa here. we have Nux, who ends up kind of waking up, and he gets the jump on these girls, and then he's like, "Hey, Bloodbag, like maybe you and me, like we're gonna like get these women all back, and things are gonna work out, and like maybe both of us are gonna be working for Immortan Joe after this, and so on and so forth, and I'm gonna get promoted and all this kind of so." But it really just turns out where like Mad Max, all that he wants to do is one, get his freaking chain disconnected from this guy. And then after that, all that he really wants to do is get in this car and try to drive away and leave everybody. So we have Mad Max starting to drive this war rig, and then it ends up, of course, stopping. Because Furiosa is telling all the girls, like, hey, like, after they end up getting their metal chastity belts broken off, Furiosa is telling everybody to just grab all their stuff and start running for the rig, because eventually the war rig is to have a kill switch. So Furiosa is to go on and convince Mad Max that she's the only one that can drive this rig, and so Mad Max is saying, it's like, well, then, like, I'll take you and that's it. And she's like, no, like, if you're going to take me, you're going to take all of us. So it's like, Mad Max is just like, okay. So, without noticing it, Nux is to eventually, while this rig is in motion, he jumps onto the back of it. And so Furiosa's big bargain is she has a tool to help Max get this this mask off, and so she gives him this file, and so while he's kind of just filing away and at some point getting this mask off, we have at some point Max also going on, and because he is to find a gun that is to be some secret gun that is to be broken off to this side of this gun, off to the side of this like truck there, some kind of secret hidden gun. So Mad Max fires it a couple of times at Furiosa, because he's not going to kill her, but I guess he just wanted to show, like, hey, I'm willing to waste bullets even if it's on you. So, and that's why he was able to drive away, because he fires off the Furiosa fires off the double barrel shotgun, realizing that there's nothing in it. And so we have both Furiosa and Mad Max fighting just to kill this guy, because it seems like he's going to be a problem for them. But anyways, so we have Max going on and spotting all the secret compartments for all of these guns, and so he starts stacking all of the weapons all in this bag, and kind of takes the bag, and Furiosa is to realize that there's still one secret knife that they don't know about. Like, man, like, there's so many secret compartments for all these weapons. Like, man, like, they really don't want this rig to be taken by anybody. So Mad Max is kind of working on his thing, so all of a sudden we have it where there is to be a problem with with one of the trailers. It's kind of disconnected. So Mad Max goes back to reconnect this trailer, and so now we have a tour. Nux is making his way in front of the truck to try and stop these girls from moving the vehicle, and so we eventually have them trying to push Nux out of this vehicle, and they're telling him that, like, oh, he's a kamikaze, he's a person that just wants to die and go to Valhalla, and so Nux was to go on and say lines like, oh, what a day, what a lovely day, and I live, I die, I live again. And so that's what all that really matters with Nux, is that really he's going to live again at some point, whether it's reincarnation or whichever, living in his Valhalla like world after he is to die. So, but he then supposedly gets pushed out of this vehicle, and we are to think that we're never going to see this character again, but man, would we be wrong. So, we go on and we have Max making his way back to the uh, front of the truck, now without his mask on. He took that off. So we now have Max kind of like okay, like I guess that's over with. So we now have Furiosa, who is to mention that she is to have made a deal with these buzzards to trade the stuff that she had for possibly more gasoline. But the only thing is that Furiosa is supposed to be alone. So all these girls have to go on, and as well as Max, have to all hide. And so Furiosa is asking Max, like, hey, what is your name? And Max is like, well, I don't have a name. I'm not going to tell you what my name is. And so Furiosa is like, well, okay, well, when I shout out the word fool, like, that means you drive. So, because something has gone bad with this deal. So, Furiosa is going on and talking to these buzzards and kind of seeing, like, what she can get out of this. But the more and more she goes on and talks to these buzzards, it seems like things aren't going to go as well as she is to hope. And it seems like these buzzards are going to try to take advantage of her, because technically they're like, she's kind of outside her parameters, or outside of her zone of things. So it's like, ha 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 ha. Like, since she has no real protection, like, we can go and easily take this thing. So these buzzards go on to take advantage of Furiosa, and so Furiosa is to, of course, shout out fool, try to get back in the truck, and them drive like crazy out of there. So now we have the buzzards in their buzzard car and their motorcycles trying to chase after this truck now, trying to get at it. And we start to see that there are certain things that end up happening here because of this exchange. And so we go on and have like some of the characters having to shoot out their way to kind of kill these guys. And so we push on here, and like all of the buzzard guys are to be killed off. But now we still have back again where we are to, of course, get Immortal Joe and a number of his guys all trying to get back to Furiosa in this war rig. So we go on and we see Nux, who, of course, is to go on and mention that he is to have a like a scarf of one of the women that, of course, is to have been Immortal Joe's women. And so we have kind of Immortal Joe just kind of being like, oh, okay, like just get on one of my vehicles. And so we have one guy who's mentioning, I think it's Slit, who I thought he ended up dying. Slit is to mention how he has like Mad Max's boot, and so that should mean something, but it doesn't. It's like, who cares? So So we go on and have all these guys chasing after this vehicle now, and so if we didn't have to deal with the buzzards, now we have to deal with Immortan Joe and all of his people. So these guys are chasing after these people, and so we end up having it to where eventually uh, they're honestly starting to run out of bullets quickly and easily with, uh, of course, these weapons. Like, we end up having this sniper rifle that Fiorusa is to use to go and shoot some of the buzzards, and they're starting to realize how they only have like 4 bullets of this, but they have like 20, they have like 30 some odd bullets of this smallest gun. That's gonna like there isn't much to do with that. Where like even if you shoot somebody, they're gonna be dying really slowly. So we go on here and we just continue to have the war rig desperately trying to just outrace all of these guys. And so we go on here and we consistently have these guys getting really close. And all of a sudden, at one point, we have Splendid, who is to, of course, open this door so that way Immortal Joe doesn't shoot them because, like, she has his child, and so she's basically using her body as the shield here, just like, hey, we're not just things, and like, you're not gonna kill us. And so Immortan Joe is to say like, well, hey, that's my offspring, that's my child. So eventually what happens here is they realize that they're getting a little bit too close to these kind of mountain-like areas and whichever, and the Splendid is still like off to the side here, and because she's just kind of still like body shielding this car so that way they don't go on and shoot this vehicle because they realize how no one will want to shoot these women because of how high value they are. So we all of a sudden have the Splendid who is to almost get crushed seemingly, to where we just have Mad Max kind of driving this truck as Furiosa was to tell him how this truck is to be driven. And so we have that weird goofy moment where Mad Max is to turn out of the the vehicle and just doing this like weird goofy thumbs up thing, like he's Batman from like '89, or no, Batman Forever, where we just have like the Val Kilmer Batman that's going and supposedly looking at Commissioner Gordon in the hugely distant sky, and he's like he like turns back weirdly. Like we have that still same awkward moment where Mad Max is kind of like, hey, good for you that you didn't die. But then immediately after that, when the Splendid is to try to get back in the vehicle, she slips and falls to her death, going underneath the wheels, supposedly. And everybody's thinking, hey, we should go back for her. Like, she's not dead. And Max is telling everybody she went underneath the wheels. And they're like, no, I think she's fine. And he's like, no, she went underneath the wheels. She's dead. So we have Immortan Joe completely stop dead to go and retrieve the Splendid, and so that kind of gives the war rig a little bit more time. So we go on and have the Immortan Joe like trying to like see if this girl is still okay, and it seems like she's kind of barely breathing. And so Immortan Joe is telling the doctor here, the organic mechanic, to be like, hey, like C-section this girl, get the baby out, and so that way, like, we can see if we can still, like, save the child at least. So they end up cutting the woman, getting the child to realize that the baby's dead, and the baby would have been a boy, and it's a perfect boy, and so on and so forth. And so we have Ridicus Erectus, who's going on and shouting to everybody, like, I would have had a baby brother, a perfect brother, and and this and that, just kind of repeating what that guy would have said. It's like, well, yeah, but this baby is sadly dead now. Sorry, sucks, I know, but still. So I think this is a part where we get to where we have the Peacemaker car gaining its way to try and get to the war rig. And so now, realizing how very few bullets they have here, we have Mad Max, who's to see this Peacemaker vehicle that has this kind of like weird, like tank, like way of wheels, which is kind of weird. It's kind of like this car slash tank of a thing. It looks so cool, but it's also very weird. And you would think that that car wouldn't be like going all that fast in all actuality. But anyways, so the the gun farmer who, or the bullet farmer, is to accidentally go blind in this Peacemaker car. And so Mad Max is realizing that there is to be a car coming up soon that is to have quite a bit of guns and bullets and whatever. So all that he's really taking with him is to just be this like thing of gasoline, and I guess that's all he really needs. I guess he's gonna just like pour this gasoline on this car to just distract them, and because like I guess he doesn't light the car on fire because he still gets all of this ammo and whatever from these people. So yeah. So we don't see what actually happens to this vehicle, but Mad Max just comes back with all these bullets and all these guns and all these things, and they're like, okay, great. Like now we can have some kind of a real defense here. So we find out that Nux is actually still alive and still a thing, and he's just kind of hiding out inside of this war rig. And it seems like now he's willing to actually help these women out, even so much so that he is actually uh, seeing one of the girls as possibly a like a girlfriend, possibly. And I'm kind of just not quite sure which actual girl this is because I don't think it's actually listed here. Uh, yeah, I don't think it's actually listed. Isn't that great? Freaking IMDb. It's the girl that, of course, is to be the redhead. Like, that's to be the notable thing about her. But I don't see her actual name here. But maybe it's capable? Anyways, so we go on and we have Nux kind of mentioning on how Splendid was just driven under those wheels and how horrible that was, and how Nux is starting to realize that he's going to possibly die soon with Larry and Barry and Larry on the side of his body, and that it's only a matter of time before he is going to possibly die. And so we kind of have uh, this kind of changing of things with this character, where all of a sudden he's realizing, well, maybe like Morton Joe doesn't really care about me. Maybe I'm just used as a kamikaze, and maybe I'm not like maybe I really don't have any value to my leader, and so on. So there's kind of like a come to Jesus kind of moment for Nux here. So we have these characters going further on because all they're talking about is this green place. And so Max is going on and saying like, "Wait a minute, like you like have any of you actually been to this green place before? Do you even know it exists?" And Furiosa's like, "Well, yeah, like I used to live there and like I have people there." And so Max is just like, "Okay, sure, like I'll believe you." Yeah, like if you say it, I guess it's true. So we of course go further on and have these people driving off, and they are to go on and have this one girl who is to be in this kind of electrical tower, and we have them looking over this girl that obviously isn't dressed at all, and they're thinking like, "Hey, should we go out there and help her?" And Mad Max is like, "That's bait. Like, don't no. Like, I'm not gonna go and save that girl because there's some kind of trickery going on here." So we go on and find out that yes, there's trickery afoot, and Fiorosa is to mention of who she is, and that she used to be one of these people that are coming out of the woodwork. Because we have the Keeper of the Seeds, we have the Valkyrie, we have the Volvales, the Volvalines, the Volvalines. That's all, folks. These characters that which names of which I can't pronounce. They're coming out of the woodwork and they're like, "Oh yeah, like Furiosa, like yeah, like she's our Furiosa, like we know her." I'm like, "Well, thank God, like you have somebody that like knows this person." And so we have them kind of reconnecting, and so now we have Furiosa that's asking him. It's like, "Well, hey, like where is the green place?" And they're like, "Well, you already drove through it. Like that place that we were, like you already drove through it. Like there is no green left." And she's like, "Oh my god." So she goes on and she's screaming in pain because the only home that she's ever known besides the Citadel is now to basically be gone here, and there's nowhere to go. So all these people just pack into this, and so they're just like, "Well, like we're just continuing to go on in this one direction, and it just seems like we're just continuing to get bub kissed nothing, and it seems like we're just going to keep getting more and more salt, more and more desert." And so eventually Mad Max and everybody is to really come up with a real legitimate plan now. And so Furios is saying it's like, "Well, like we can all take as much gas as we are to have from this rig and start putting it in these motorcycles, and we can all just ride off with these motorcycles." And really Mad Max is to have the plan of like, "Well, how about this? The Citadel is to be unmanned right now. The same place that was to have plenty of water and all kinds of resources and whichever. And so why don't we just go right back to the Citadel to just claim it and just take it? And yeah, we might have to fight our way to get there, but like once we go and kill off all these people, which they're gonna have to do, because it's basically a race back to the Citadel, then they will have enough resources to be able to continue to live their lives in some kind of peace instead of having to eventually completely run out of resources and then die in the desert somewhere. because there's nowhere else to go. So we end up having these characters turn around in this war rig, and eventually the guys are to realize that this is happening, that they're turning around here. And so now they're realizing, like, oh my god, they're going to chase back to the Citadel. So now it's this big, massive chase that we now end up having the Morton Joe, who is to start to have these guys called, and I want to try to get this correct here. We end up having these guys called polecats. So polecats are to be these guys that are kind of like having these kind of pendulum dangling thing where they go on and they try to jump onto the war rig to try and commandeer it, because this is towards the end of the film. So, and if there's anything that I had possibly forgotten at this point, because I'm sure I did, then I apologize. But I think all these like kind of fighting sequences, like how quickly can we gonna just pop all these out and ram all these bad boys out there. So if there's anything I didn't go into fully descriptive about, because I know there's some interesting dialogue here at some points, with kind of where we have, of course, the Joe going on talking about that he's the Redeemer and he's this and that, and like he has this kind of nice kind of speech in the beginning here. But yeah, so we go on here and we have this big, massive fight out to chase our way back to, of course, the Citadel. And at one point, we have, of course, Joe's car that ends up taking one of the girls, who, of course, is to be the girl who's to be Lenny Kravitz's daughter, who is, of course, to be the knowing girl. Toast, the knowing. So we have these guys just kind of like battling it out, and so we have in this war rig, we have certain like women who are kind of manning like certain parts of this truck. There's certain girls at the back of it. There's certain people that have certain kind of weapons that are kind of defending themselves. We have at one point it almost seeming that one of the Volvalini girls are like at some point to seemingly look like they're being hurt, but then it turns around and it doesn't like seem like they're hurt. It just seems like they're shaken by almost getting killed. To where all of a sudden they go and they grab this bag and they're clutching onto this bag. So, but we drive on. So we drive on here, and we consistently have Nux who's putting this this kind of thing into the engine, which is trying to get it to move a lot faster. But we end up having, of course, one of the war dogs taking his vehicle and pouring stuff into his engine, and like they're trying to just outrace one another to the Citadel. And Furiosa is telling Nux that it's like, hey, like one of my engines is gonna go, and the other engine that I've left is like on the breaking point. And so now we have Nux who's actually fixing the engine to keep this war rig going. I'm like, good God. So Nux is telling Furiosa that the engine is going to work for now. So we go on and have this speed chase, and so what really happens with these girls continuing to get collected into Joe's vehicle here, we have Mad Max go and jump on to, of course, I think it's called the Bigfoot. the car of which that is to be the People Eater's car. And so he starts going through and he starts murdering and killing all those guys. So I guess like that's another thing where Mad Max technically there's a lot of stuff that he does do for this big ending battle. Like we also have him at one point where he is to of course be grabbed by one of those guys and he's on that kind of like that pendulum swinging uh polecat thing where he goes on and he cuts the polecat guy off and now he's just kind of swinging and he's making his way back onto one of the other vehicles and because he's trying to like help out here. So we have Mad Max who is to continue to drive in this Bigfoot car. And so we have, of course, Mad Max going and putting the Bigfoot's foot on, or the People Eater's foot onto the gas pedal for Mad Max to jump back onto the war rig, because what these guys all plan to do next is to go onto Joe's vehicle, because Furiosa is very wounded at this point. She ends up getting freaking stabbed, and she really ends up getting hurt here. But even with her still getting hurt, she goes on to take down Joe here, because of course, like the big enemy, we have to have Furiosa take out. Because having for like Mad Max technically took out like the second man in charge. So Furiosa goes on to find Joe in his vehicle driving off. And so Furiosa goes and takes this chain and hooks this guy's mask. And so she puts this chain underneath this guy's wheel. And so this like rips his like whole jaw off of his face and murders this guy. And so eventually, one by one, everybody ends up going into Joe's car, and we end up having Erectus, who is going on, and he's on the war rig, and it's really just Nux at the end of it, just kind of on this vehicle, and we ended up having at some point where Mad Max was trying to fight this guy, but it's like, are you freaking kidding me? This Roid Ranger. I don't want to see Roid Ranger because like this guy is freaking massively big. To where we have in like the Condemned, where like Stone Cold is like, man, we're gonna have a big problem. But it's a guy that's so big, so like in this world, I would assume that like this guy would have like be a Roid Ranger or whatever. But or maybe there would just be this like the jobs they would have him do would have to make him like muscular and big and whatever. But still, Nathan Jones, I don't want to say that you're a Roid Ranger. No, you're just really massive guy. And so I really appreciate freaking him being so big. So whatever. Anyways, so what ends up happening is Rictus ends up pulling out this engine of this car and is going to basically crush Nux with it. And so Nux is just going on and saying like, well, I think I'm just going to die here. So he's just telling all the people in Joe's vehicle as they drive off, like, hey, witness me. So, because when Joe is to go off to try to get back, or when Nux is to try to get back into the war rig, Joe is giving him that spray and telling him he'll make it to Valhalla. And so Nux gets back onto the vehicle. And so, because for some reason they like to spray these guys in chrome, and because that's always to be the thing of them getting sprayed, I guess, to have this kind of like drug as they are to die. Because one person obviously is to die, and Nux is to tell him at one point, like, get back up. And so he sprays himself with chrome, and he's like, witness me! And then he takes his spears and he chucks and explodes this one vehicle. And I'm like, yeah, you did it! As they're fighting off, I think, the buzzards at that point. So we go on and we have the war rig that is now having Nux just kind of slide this thing and have it flip over, so that way none of the other war dogs will make it past this point and will just continue to all crash into this this, of course, war rig, where I think we even had at one point Mad Max going and taking out uh, the morale machine, where he's going on and like he's fighting off this guitarist. He's trying to like knock him off, but we end up finding out that he just has this kind of like swing of a thing, like he's attached to this kind of slingshotting like thing, so he's not gonna really just be bumped off this thing so easily. But after we end up seeing this whole crash happen, the first thing we end up seeing is the guitar kind of slinging into the air, and then we end up seeing a steering wheel and this skull mouth that is to be on every single steering wheel. We also had the one point where the war rig had to forcibly go on and get this like wrench to steer the car, because eventually someone was to rip off the steering wheel, but they at some point found a steering wheel replacement, so they're like, oh, okay, like we'll just use this now. So we go on, and now supposedly everyone is dead. All the evil bad guys are all dead. And so now we have our heroes driving off back to the Citadel with Joe's car. And so we end up having, of course, this drawbridge being lowered down, so to speak. This little elevator of things being dropped down. And so now everyone's contemplating whether or not Furiosa should be in this little this elevator thing that they had plopped down here. So eventually we have it to where the last kind of descendant of Joe is to just say like, hey, like, come on, like it's fine. Like Joe was kind of a tyrant, and so like now like all this is finally over. So let's break out the water. Let's break out like now everything is finally over, and we can just kind of like just be ourselves. So everybody's celebrating. We have still like Furiosa, who had almost died, and we had Max, who was kind of having to give her a blood transfusion to just keep her alive here. So in that blood transfusion, Max is to finally tell Furiosa what his name is. It's Max. My name is Max. So, because she just called him a fool before. So we're assuming or assessing that Furiosa and Max were going to end up together, but who knows? Maybe she died at the end of this, because it seems like her injuries would say that she was going to die, because she was going to have a collapsed lung and all this other stuff that was going on with her. So yeah. So that's how this movie, in my mind, is to just finish up. So hopefully I covered most of this movie. If anything, I probably didn't go into heavily detail, or I tried to just kind of skip little tiny bits of moments to eventually call this one a day. But I'm going to go out of my way to say goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody. Hopefully this was covered, and hopefully I did a well enough job doing this one, because there's always that just kind of second guessing in my brain of like, oh yeah, I forgot about all this and blah 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 blah. Like I might not have gone into every detail about who or what everything is, but it's Mad Max Fury Road. Maybe I can go into this and people might want to hear about this movie, or people could probably care less. But either way, it'll be interesting to see if people are interested in Mad Max. Because I would like to even go back to the original Mel Gibson Mad Max films because I actually like those. I enjoy them. Why can't you not, or why would you not like Two Men Enter, One Man Leave? Uh, or just I think it was like the Wheel of Fate. I think I'm just going on and talking about one whole film, but you also like the yellow cop cars that I heard from commentary that they had to be kind of held by hopes and dreams because they were just crappy cars because they didn't have much money for that film, but eventually it took him a while to do the sequels because like Mel Gibson's career just took off right after that movie and they had to take a while to get back and say, hey, like, do you want to be a part of another one of these films? And he's like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So, with that said, I am going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.